Welcome back, everyone. It's Game Day Sports Radio, another week of the Crazy Eight College Football Challenge. As always, I'm joined by the coach, Boji Wood, who always brings his silky smooth analysis of every game and every aspect of college football. How you doing tonight, Coach?
I am doing fantastic, George.
We've got the teacher, Steve Mock from Texas. Steve will teach you everything from Shakespeare to the Pythagorean theorem. If it has to do with college football, he's got some formula to figure it out for you. How you doing, Steve?
Doing great. Thanks, GC.
And again, it's a pleasure to be joined by Dave Smith out of the Midwest. Dave, this is second week with us, and I think 7 wins last week and beat the 8-ball. And on the leaderboard there, Coach, just saw every name on the panel except for one. Do you remember whose that was?
Not sure.
So, not sure. How you doing tonight, Dave?
Doing good. Glad to come back.
First game we got on the slate this week is Oklahoma State at Kansas State. First and foremost, though, before we shout out and congratulations to Kansas State quarterback Adrian Martinez, named a finalist today for the William V. Campbell Trophy, which is basically the academic Heisman. And I think that's a nice accomplishment anytime for any football player. Coach, so, it seems like the last few weeks, the Big 12s has started to feel more like it's the champion's going to be determined by who the last man standing is. Each week we seem to be having more of a conversation surrounding is the quarterback going to go? A lot of them are game time decisions. No different this week. And again, Adrian Martinez himself, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to go. Sanders last week for Oklahoma State, obviously game time decision there as well. But this game is big because the winner of this most likely will find themselves looking at a rematch with TCU in the Big 12 championship game. Definitely gives themselves at least it puts themselves in the driver's seat to take that position. So how do you see this one breaking down?
Well, I consulted our good friend Mike Bernard with OTM Sports, and it kind of made me do a double take when he mentioned that the Wildcats are 1.5 favorites in this game. As you said, the first thing you have to look at are the quarterback injuries that we're dealing with. Spencer Sanders, the senior, has passed for a little over 2,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. But they didn't know if he was going to play until they took the field last week against Texas and let him go through warmups. He played. He was effective. There's been no mention of any injury this week, but, Mike Gundy may be playing coy with that. As far as Adrian Martinez hurt last week against TCU, will he play? They're not saying. I don't think he will. If he does, he's not going to be 100%. His backup, Will Howard, he's more than capable. He kept them in the game and and they had the lead at times against TCU, but then Will Howard also hurt. And when he gets hurt, they've got nothing. Kansas State has the better defense here. The Cowboys have the more explosive offense. I think the injuries are going to have a bigger effect on the Wildcats. 5 starters are questionable right now. And Will Howard, I think he will play, but he's not going to be 100%. All those factors, I'm taking Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and I'll tell you just real quick, and you mentioned that, and Sanders and Mike Gundy being a little coy. I think that was probably one of the better coaching jobs I've seen him do. He definitely kept that somewhat quiet, and I thought he put a game plan in place to really – play to his strengths and what his limitations might be in that game to kind of and kept it quiet. So I like your pick there. I go Oklahoma State as well. Steve, who do you like?
The Cowboys' weakness has been run defense, giving up 224 yards on the ground in that loss to TCU. They also gave up 204 last week in the victory over the Longhorns. I'm not sure that Deuce Vaughn and Kansas State will take advantage of that. I think Spencer Sanders and the Pokes offense will score enough and take the victory.
Dave?
One of 3 games Saturday where both teams come in ranked in the top 25. I think Kansas State's going to try and grind it out and keep that Oklahoma State offense off the field, but they are pretty effective offensively. This is going to be a close one, I think, but I like Oklahoma State.
And well, we got a clean sweep there across the board with Oklahoma State, but the 8-ball likes Kansas State. So there you go. So hopefully weather will not be a factor as much as it seemed to be last week. I know there wasn't much talked about, but it definitely had some impact, I think, on the quarterbacks. So, Dave, I'm going to take this next one to you. Syracuse, obviously, tough loss last week down at Clemson. There's been much talked about the penalties that were the penalty that was called and the one that wasn't. But even it's kind of trickled out this week is, again, some concern about Dino Babers and some of his clock management, which has not been the first time that's come up in his tenure there, as well as the fact that leading rusher only got 5 carries in the game, some questioning with them not scoring any points in the second half. Did they play too much into Clemson's hand? Of course, Notre Dame, I mean, which Notre Dame team's going to show up, I think. And so I think this one's a kind of a hard one to forecast, but what do you think?
Well, you kind of wish me luck when you gave me the Notre Dame game, so I don't know if I need to say my Hail Marys or not before I pick this down there, but we'll see what happens. But I think it is going to be a close one. I think Syracuse comes in after that tough loss last week against Clemson, and where they are a perfect 5-0 at home so far this year. I think sophomore wide receiver Rondé Gatson is a big player receiver, so he's going to have a big game for the Orangemen. But the Irish they're kind of looking for an identity so far under first-year head coach Marcus Freeman. But they do have some players, and junior tight end Michael Mayer, he is a stud, and I think he's going to be playing on Sundays next year. He's leading the team in receptions and touchdowns. And sophomore quarterback Drew Pine, who's now stepped in for the season. If he can have a clean game, I think Notre Dame can go in and kind of surprise the Orangemen. So I'm going to take Notre Dame with an upset.
There you go, Steve. Dino Babers, as Dave kind of mentioned, looking for an identity. He's trying to, I guess, identify himself as a football school too. So he really hopes he can get the fans out there and create an animal party. I guess referring to Animal House, to create a fan atmosphere to be seen on TV. So what do you think? You think the fans up there will have an impact on this one?
I think they will. Syracuse has been playing at a higher level. A second consecutive loss could derail that momentum that Coach Babers has building in upstate New York. They've probably got 6 inches of snow this time of year. I don't see them getting derailed. Give me the orange.
There you go, Coach.
Well, of course, it's been painful for me to watch Notre Dame this year. And I told myself if you put another Notre Dame or Purdue game out, I was going to walk off the show. But, at least with Brian Kelly, we knew we were going to get 10-plus wins. And we may get disappointed in the playoffs or the bowl game, but at least we're going to have fun during the regular season. I just don't know what to think. I'm not sold on the Irish right now. I know they've had some injuries. Their best win versus a 6-1 North Carolina team that was actually overlooking the Irish when they played them. Listen, I think Syracuse gets the win. I think Notre Dame goes further in the tank. I'm going with the orange.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the orange as well. I think you're right. After that, how does Notre Dame lose to Stanford? I mean, that's almost like we talked last week about losing to Georgia Tech. So, which, by the way, is not going to run the table, as you gave me a hard time about last week. So we got a Notre Dame 2 orange or 3 orange, and the 8-ball likes Notre Dame. So there you go, Dave. And I will tell you, there has been some divine intervention on whenever we've had Notre Dame and the 8-ball pick, and Steve will tell you. So he was the only one that's backed them when they won, and so we'll see where it goes. But
I can't lose either way, so it doesn't matter. I picked the orange, but if Notre Dame wins, I'm good during Mass, so we're good.
There you go. You got it covered, huh? Yeah, you just won't tell anybody which way you picked, right?
Exactly.
So, Steve, our next one here, another 11 a.m. game. Arkansas travels down to the Plains at Auburn. Interestingly, as much as you've heard about would Harsin make it? He survived the off week, which a lot of people thought that would be the natural time for him to go. So I guess it looks like he will probably finish the season. But I think both these teams, again, Arkansas did get a much needed win against BYU, and I think comes in probably more healthy than they have been in a couple of games. And I think the big question here is, what's the mentality of Auburn coming out of the bye week? Are they rejuvenated, or are they just ready to get their season over? So how do you see this SEC matchup coming down?
The 4-3 Razorbacks hitting the road, battling the 3-4 Auburn Tigers. Tank Bigsby is the type of runner that's given the Razorbacks fits this year, and the Hogs defense gives up the second most amount of yards in the SEC. On offense, Arkansas has the 9th-ranked rushing attack in the country, and QB KJ Jefferson should be healthy coming off the bye. The Arkansas pass defense is susceptible to the big play, but I'm not so sure that Auburn QB Robbie Ashford, who's only hitting on 48% of his passes, is accurate enough to take advantage. Arkansas's balanced attack will be too much. Sorry to say for our colleague Will, but I'm picking Woo Pig Suey.
Dave?
I think the Tigers are going to have to be physical in this one if they want to stay in it down at Jordan-Hare on Saturday, because it has been a tough season so far for the Tigers, but I think it continues this week. I think quarterback KJ Jefferson for Arkansas is going to open it up in the second half, so I'll take the Razorbacks.
And Coach?
Yeah, we talk about Auburn coming off the open date. Arkansas also coming off an open date. Both of them were open this past weekend. The Hogs had lost 3 straight, and that win over BYU gives you a good taste in your mouth going into that off week. It changes the way practice goes. Guys, the Tigers have not won a football game in October, and I'm afraid they're going to go winless in October. I'm going with Arkansas.
What do you make, Coach, of that? I mean, an article came out earlier this week that even though they haven't gotten rid of Arson, that the brain trust at Auburn definitely is pushing for Deion Sanders to at least get a look and a conversation at the end of the season. So I think all indications are he's gone. Do you think they actually is that more smoke than fire, or do you think there actually some interest there?
I think there's probably more smoke than fire. They just don't want everyone to be concentrating on when they're going to get rid of Harsin because he's dead man walking. And I think the only reason that they haven't dismissed him already is it's twofold. Number one, for every week he stays, their buyout goes down. If they fire him, they're going to have an interim head coach. There's no one on that staff that's not one of his guys that's even qualified to be the interim head coach. I think they're just going to live through the season with him unless things get really, really ugly. And I don't think they will because the kids are playing hard. And he's been behind the 8 ball, no pun intended, but he's been behind the 8 ball since he's been there. There are a lot of people that didn't want him. There are very few people on campus that wanted Brian Harsin to be their head coach. And he's going to leave and he's going to go get another head coaching job and he's going to be successful. And Auburn, and again, I can tell you from experience that Auburn is a very political place. It's a very quirky place. And you've got to have a certain alliance to be able to succeed there. And Harsin never had that alliance from the beginning.
Dave, anything in the Midwest about, obviously Harsin, a Midwest guy, came down from Boise State, the opening at Nebraska, anything, any opportunity there?
I think it's going to be, and we're going to the next game that we have with Oklahoma and Iowa State. If the Iowa State head coach takes a bigger position, that might be a possibility if he's let go from Auburn that he might move up to Iowa.
I got you. Okay. Well, sometimes I forget.
I still say the perfect fit for Brian Harsin is Arizona State.
I agree. I know you mentioned it and you've been on that early, and I definitely have that clip saved. So when it happens, we can go ahead and play it for you that you were on it early and you were accurate as you are many times, Coach. And Steve, I won't forget him this time. The 8 ball does like Arkansas. So I think we got a clean sweep there of Arkansas. So, Dave, nice little segue into the next game, Oklahoma versus Iowa State. I do think it's a little interesting. You mentioned if he goes, Iowa State head coach goes on to a bigger and better, more prominent job when I think they start off with high expectations and they're 0-4 in conference right now. Oklahoma obviously had a lot of gaps to fill. He had a rough little 3-game skid against Kansas State, TCU, and, of course, the just horrendous loss, 49-0 to Texas, but bounced back with a 52-42 win against Kansas. And it looks like maybe they've got something to build around going forward and into next year with Dylan Gabriel. So, Steve, obviously I think Iowa State is just absolutely has to have a win here, and I think Oklahoma probably comes in with a little more confidence. What do you think?
Well, the Cyclones have only defeated the Sooners 7 times, even though they've played 87 ball games, but 2 of those wins have happened in the past 5 years. Both teams are struggling as Iowa State has dropped 4 straight. OU has lost 3 out of 4. This game also offers up an interesting contrast of strength versus strength and weakness versus weakness. When OU quarterback Taylor Gabriel is healthy, the Sooners offense is hard to stop, but they'll be challenged by one of the top defenses in the Big 12. We've all seen Brent Venables' defense give up huge plays and lots of points this season, but does the Iowa State offense have enough explosiveness to take advantage? In a game that'll probably be decided by a field goal, I'll take the Cyclones at home.
Wow. Well, Dave, you had some interest in this one with the coach, and so where do you think Steve's right?
Well, I think both these teams come in with kind of disappointing records so far this year. But if you look at the schedules, like you mentioned, like with that big loss Oklahoma took against Texas, some of those other games, they just were not even worried about playing, it seemed like. Look at the games that Iowa State has played. Cyclones have been in almost every game so far this year, and they have battled. So I think it's going to be a close one. I'm going to take Iowa State as well.
There you go, Coach.
Another interesting point, both of these teams, like Arkansas and Auburn, both coming off open dates this week. Again, as we mentioned, the Cyclones 3-0 to 3-4, but they never quit fighting. They love their head coach. They play hard for their head coach. I think some of these Sooners are still buying into this new staff. A crazy thought, because you never would think this, but I think a defensive game favors Iowa State. So I'm going to take the Cyclones also.
I am going to go with Oklahoma, though. I think Iowa State's a little down, and I think that I like what Oklahoma's quarterback's doing. And the 8 ball agrees with me, Oklahoma. So we'll see. You guys have a chance to pick one up on the 8 ball there. So, Coach, the next one we got is Miami at Virginia. Both teams obviously are coming in and 3-4. I think whoever wins this game, obviously a leg up for a bowl game. Did Oregon get the better deal in that with Lanning going up there? And is Cristobal really what they expected? Or do you think that Miami had too high of expectations on him in their first year coming down? Who do you like here, Miami or Virginia?
Well, I think it goes back to the fact, just like with Jimbo Fisher, you can't buy a national championship just outright. And I think Miami higher-ups, they thought, hey, we'll throw $8 million a year at Mayo Cristobal. We've got some NIL money coming in. We're going to be back relevant very quickly. Not happening. Tony Elliott, on the other hand, hired at Virginia after being OC at Clemson for a lot of years. They knew that they were coming into a rebuilding process, and they're being patient with him. Tyler Van Dyke, he's the Miami quarterback that Cristobal hung his hat on. He's going to be doubtful to play. He's had a lot of nagging injuries this year and got hurt, let off the field last year, did not come back. Neither one of these teams scoring a lot of points right now, but this is the telltale sign. The leading rusher in this game has 441 yards. That's Henry Parrish Jr. of the Canes. He ranks 92nd nationally. That tells me all I need to know about either one of these two teams. If you can't run the football, you can't win football games. And you go back, you look at Lane Kiffin. He's got a guy that's almost rushed for 1,000 yards. Oregon's got a guy that's rushed for over 800 yards. So you've got to be able to run the football. If you subtract the 70 points against Bethune-Cookman and the 30 points against Southern Miss that Miami scored, they're averaging right at 20 points a game. Virginia averaging only 17 points per game. But, hey, they knew they weren't going to be any good. It was a work in progress. And with the home field advantage and Van Dyke out, I like Virginia over Miami in this one.
Dave?
Like Coach talked about, another couple of teams with disappointing records so far coming into the season. But I think Cristobal might get them going this week and get the troops going. And I think the offense might kick into gear, maybe with some new faces in there. So I'm going to take Miami.
There you go, Steve.
After listening to the expert analysis that the coach laid out there, I don't think I want to pick either one of these teams. However, since I've got to go with one, I just don't see Virginia having enough points, having enough offense in this one. I think Tony Elliott is building something there, but right now I'll take Miami.
Yeah, I'm taking Miami as well with you, Steve. But I think the coach did do a nice breakdown there. And I think the 8 ball must have listened to his breakdown as well, because the 8 ball went with Virginia, Coach. think you and the 8 Ball, ever since you guys made that little piece accord, you guys have you guys kind of been on the same wavelength there.
Yeah, we found a mutual respect for each other, so that's what we're going with.
So, all right. Well, hey, Dave, another Midwest game, and I think this one's interesting. You got Brett Bielema traveling to Nebraska. Nebraska's obviously got a couple of wins since parting ways with Scott Frost, and everybody's kind of hustling for position up there. Illinois, this would be a big win for them because they lead in the Big Ten in their division, and getting a win here obviously helps. Now they do have the tougher schedule the rest of the way, but that does include a head-to-head matchup with Purdue. But they really have no margin for error to let one like this sneak up on them. So on the road at Nebraska, how do you see Brett Bielema doing?
Well, I'll tell you, there's lots of excitement here in the home state in Champaign these days down with Illinois and Illini head coach Brett Bielema and what's going on down there. They're having a great season so far. So lots of excitement going on. Nebraska continues to look for the next Tom Osborne to bring the Huskers back to prominence, but he is not there just yet. Senior transfer quarterback Tommy DeVito keeps managing Illinois' offense and keeps getting victories and performing well and not hurting the team. And then also the exciting play of junior tailback Chase Brown for Illinois. He's had a phenomenal season, very exciting to watch. So don't see a whole lot of effort coming from Nebraska. So I'm going to bring back the Chief, and I got Illinois.
There you go. Steve.
Yeah, Nebraska has won 2 out of 3 since Scott Frost's exit, while Illinois has won 5 in a row to move to 6-1. I think the Illini will be able to run it on the road, and I'll take Brett Bielema's boys to win another one.
Coach?
I like Illinois, but one thing I want to say, don't overlook this game, because if you do, you've got the potential to be upset. And something that hasn't been talked about, Brett Bielema, you look at it, he's the prototypical Nebraska type coach. Wants to run the ball, wants to be hard-nosed on offense and defensive line. This could be a job interview.
I don't know, Dave, you weighed in on that pretty strong last week. Think he's their guy.
Last week we talked about it, that I think Illinois is going to lock him down long-term after seeing his results so far this year. So if they were to let him go after the Lovie Smith disaster over the last few years, I think they'd be silly if they didn't. So we'll see what happens.
I totally agree. The one thing that Illinois has a history of, though, is, and not just Illinois, a lot of schools, they get a coach, they have some success, and they're not used to stepping up to the plate financially. Now, talk basketball, Illinois is going to match pennies to pennies with anybody, but they've got to start doing it with football. And I agree. I think that Brett Bielema would, given equal packages, I think he would rather be at Illinois, because he can win 8-9 games in Illinois. He can be a hero. He can win 8 or 9 at Nebraska, and they say, well, why didn't we win 10 or 11 or 12?
Well, he really hit the in-state recruiting very hard this year. He got quite a good freshman class that came in from the in-state, and so a lot of those Chicago players were able to come down, which they haven't been able to get to over the last few years. Plus, he had a few other transfers that have been able to play, and he's starting to pull a team together. Defense is playing really, really good, but that offense has been pretty consistent as well. So he's got a good thing going right now. So we'll see what the Illini got going on.
And one thing about Illinois, if you've never been to Memorial Stadium, it is a intimate atmosphere. It is, when that place is going, it's magical, especially at night. No other way to put it.
The 8 Ball likes Nebraska, so the 8 Ball thinks it sneaks up. Next one we got here is SMU at Tulsa. Steve?
The Ponies and the Golden Hurricanes both enter the game at 3-4. SMU is explosive offensively, averaging a hair over 34 points per game. Quarterback Taylor Mordecai completes 60% of his throws, averaging 42 attempts and 327 yards per game. Tulsa can also score, averaging 32. The Golden Hurricanes have struggled to find the big play, but their ground game is good for 136 yards per contest. In what looks to be a high-scoring affair, I'll take the Ponies on the road.
Dave?
I'm with Steve right there. I think you're going to want to put your running shoes on for this one because defense will be optional. I'm going to take the Ponies as well. Give me SMU.
Coach?
I like Mordecai at quarterback. Both these teams are 3-4, but the Ponies are the better 3-4 team. I'm going SMU.
I'm going SMU as well. They've had some close losses, and I think they pull this one out. But the 8-ball likes Tulsa. So 8-ball likes Tulsa home team. So, I'm not sure where we go with this next one. You got Ole Miss, lost, one that I think shocked a lot of people down in Death Valley. But now you got A&M. When you think that you can't find anything else to go wrong with that program, players suspended, and there's rumors that players are some of that highly touted freshman class is trying to recruit other kids in the freshman class to get in the portal and leave because it's such a mess there. So, I don't know. What do you think? I don't even know where you go with A&M at this point.
Well, I think when things are going bad, the rock gets rolling downhill and it starts picking up moss, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Harking back to the days in the late 80s with Barry Switzer, there's some things going on that shouldn't have been going on. Yeah, there were. But again, the stories just get more sensationalized. You don't know what's true and what's not true. And that's the situation at A&M. It's just going to have to play out. The off-field situations, it's just going to have to play out. Now, getting back to the game, though, the Rebels, I think they got a little taste of reality when they went into Death Valley last week. They went into that game a little bit too confident against LSU because LSU, I think we've seen, they're not a bad team. Jackson Dart, he played poorly, but in his defense, he had no help from anyone else. As we said, A&M just a train wreck right now. Injuries, no imagination on offense. The suspensions. Just a few weeks ago, Jimbo's talking that they control their all their goals are still in front of them. They can still make the playoffs. They're the laughing stock of college football right now. Last week, in my opinion, was a good loss for Ole Miss because they lost to a good team. I think had they won last week, I think they would have lost this week to a bad A&M team because I think the Rebels would have been looking forward to Alabama. We got past LSU. Our mess don't stink. We're going to roll all the way to Bama, and it's going to be a showdown and all this. They don't overlook the Aggies now, and because of that, I think Ole Miss gets the win.
Steve.
Yeah, it looks like two teams headed in opposite directions. A&M's lost 3 straight, and injuries had them using third-team quarterback freshman Connor Wegman in the loss to South Carolina. At 7-1, Ole Miss looks to bounce back from that beatdown in Cajun country, and I think Jackson Dart and the Rebels' offense will score enough to continue Jimbo Fisher's struggles down in Aggieland.
Dave.
Well, let's hope College Station doesn't go looking for the head of Jimbo Fisher this week, but 3 A&M losses in a row is not good with such big expectations so far this year. And last week, a bad loss for the Rebels down at LSU, but I think Coach was right. I think they kind of overlooked them. They were looking ahead down the line, so I'm going to take Ole Miss to get back on track with a victory.
And I'm going to go Ole Miss as well. I think the same thing. I think there's just too much distraction, too much everything going down at College Station. And you know what? The 8-ball agrees with us, Ole Miss. So, all right, Steve, about to get 2 more games here. We got Baylor versus Texas Tech. Obviously, Baylor, I think, had much higher, loftier expectations at the start of the season, but I think a strong finish there. They still feel positive about where they, about the year, but I think this one is going to be critical in making that happen. And obviously we talked all season, playing up in Lubbock at Texas Tech is a challenge, and it's no easy task. So do you think the Bears can get it done up there in Lubbock?
Yeah, both teams unranked. Both are 4-3, and both are coming off of wins. Baylor by 12 over Kansas, Tech by 38 over West Virginia. Baylor won last year's contest by 3 points, but that was in Waco. First-year Tech coach Joey McGuire was previously a coach at Baylor, so this is his first opportunity to match wits with mentor Dave Aranda. Baylor wants to control this contest with their ground game, but Tech looks a little more explosive with quarterback Baron Morton leading the attack. And with this game under the lights in Lubbock, I look for the football to be flying along with plenty of those tortillas, and Tech holds on for a wild win.
There you go, Dave.
Well, I don't know which way to go, and I just noticed too. So I don't know if I go with Baylor or if I go with Texas Tech. I got options, but I think this is going to be another shootout on Saturday. Both teams averaging nearly 40 points a game, but I really like how the Red Raiders played so far this year. So I'm going to take Texas Tech at home.
Coach.
I look at these two teams, really no discernible difference. I mean, points for or against, about even, same for yardage. No significant injuries have popped up this week. Texas Tech, usually tough at home. It's tough to play in Lubbock. I'm going to give another nod to the home field, and that's really the only reason why. If it were in Waco, I'd probably pick Baylor, but I'm going to go Texas Tech.
I'm going to go Texas Tech too, just for that one reason. Home field. Steve, you always hear Dave Aranda's name coming up for positions, open or not these days. Are you hearing anything over there in Texas about anything? Anybody looking at him at this point?
Well, they may be looking, but the word out of Waco is that he thinks he's found his niche there. He's not the most outgoing, marketable kind of guy. He kind of likes to fly under the radar. And any of you who've been to Waco, Texas, know that's pretty much under the radar. They've opened, their hearts to him. They love him. He loves them. I look for him to stick around in Waco for a while.
Well, 8-Ball likes Texas Tech, the home team as well, so we got a clean sweep there. All right, last one on the slate. Obviously, they got a little different on this than we normally do, but this was somewhat slim pickings, and this is always a perennial game. Coach, Florida versus Georgia. Georgia favored by 22 points. We're obviously doing this one with the points, but just felt like this one was always a critical one in the SEC. Felt like we need to break this one down and make this one a pick 'em versus the points.
The world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville. Magical time to be there. One of the few games that I would go see as a fan. There's been talk of moving this game to campus for recruiting purposes because you can leave tickets for recruits if you're the designated home team, but you can't entertain them or anything like that. Something needs to be done because this game would not be the same on campus as it is in Jacksonville. Georgia leads this series 53-44-2. Last year, they won 34-7 on the way to the national title. The Dogs have won 4 of the last 5, but the last 10 games have been split 5-5. Anthony Richardson, the quarterback for Florida, we know how much raw talent he has, but it hasn't produced the wins like the Gators need to. Stetson Bennett, the walk-on that nobody wanted, but now he's got a national championship under his belt, playing with a ton of confidence. Go back to the start of the season. Georgia, they've gotten better. The Gators haven't. No matter what, you look at the Georgia defense, 9 points per game. You ain't going to lose many games just giving up 9 points per game in this day and age. Florida hadn't got the studs to stay in this race. I think it's the Dogs in a rout.
And you think they cover the 22?
They cover the 22, yes.
All right, Steve.
Well, I look for Georgia to win, but if you are giving me more than 3 touchdowns in a neutral site in a rivalry game, I may have to readjust my thinking, but for now, I'll take the Gators.
All right, Dave.
I'm with you, Coach. I think this is one party I've heard it's nothing but a great time with a big rivalry game. Defending national champ Georgia, they've got a very good offense. Their defense is outstanding. But if you look at their schedule, they really haven't played that strong of a schedule this year and any big names really. But this one I think is going to be one down in the trenches, and I think the big boys up front are going to battle it out. But I think the Gators can make it a game, so give me the points. I'll take Florida.
And the 8-Ball obviously likes having 3 touchdowns, so the 8-Ball takes Florida. So there you go.
The lone man in the boat with the Dogs, huh? I hear you.
Well, Dave, thanks for joining us again this week. We hope to have you back with us again next week. You've been a great addition to the show. We love having the insight, especially from the Midwest. Coach, as always, you break it down. And Steve, I almost got on you. I thought you had a little orange there, but I like the Lake Highlands red and black. So you're safe in my book this week. So All right, guys. Well, let's enjoy some college football this week, and thanks for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you as always.
Have a
Enjoyed
good
it.
weekend, guys.
Have a good one.